Hi, this is Maurice Hamington. I'm a professor of philosophy and affiliate faculty in women, gender, and sexuality studies at Portland State University. Today, I'm offering a short presentation on care ethics and how it might help you in your analysis in the ethics bowl. As a little background and overview, I want to remind you that normative ethics is the idea that ethical theories, ethical approaches can provide you with some idea about what to do, what are the values, what are the standards, what makes for a moral action. And there are a variety of different ethical approaches. Many of them have existed throughout the history of the Western tradition of philosophy, going back to the ancient Greeks. And I just want to name a few of the major ones. One is virtue theory, and this explores the idea of what makes for a good virtue, a moral virtue. Issues of character and questions of moral excellence are brought up in this context. Another approach to morality is deontological ethics, sometimes referred to as Kantian ethics, for the significant work that Immanuel Kant did in this area. Its concerns are about moral duties and moral rights and moral rules in any given situation. Uh, and then there's consequential ethics, which is more about the outcomes. One form of consequentialism is utilitarianism, and so the real concern is what is the impact on people? What does the most good for the most number of people? So those are three very traditional, very standard approaches. And then there's also care ethics. And in care ethics, it's a concern about morality in relationships. It's sometimes referred to as a relational ethic. And to consider those moral issues, it includes looking at concerns about the context, including the power dynamics amongst the individuals involved in any particular situation. So we're focusing on care ethics, and part of the background is just a real brief history of this way of thinking. Care is as old and as humanity is, and has helped to uh, create the kind of cooperation and compassion necessary for humanity to survive over the eons. But it has been overlooked in moral philosophy up until recently, partially because it's been devalued as women's work because of rampant sexism, and never considered kind of as important enough to be considered an ethical theory until recently. And then, beginning in the 1980s, you have feminist theorists in a number of different disciplines starting to talk about care and drawing from women's experience to think about what is important in the morality of relationships. And so since then, it has received a great deal of attention across a number of different disciplines. Um, you have articles on care, of course, in philosophy, but also in anthropology, in business ethics, in performance, in psychology, in sociology, and it's very big in political theory, political science. There's a number of scholars working in that field as well. So it's really created a stronghold in academic thinking and all over the world, not just in the United States, but there are theorists working in Europe, in African countries, in Asian countries, and in Australia as well on this discipline. So, what is care ethics? We all talk about care all the time. It's a very common term that everybody knows about. And yet, in philosophy, what we do is we seek precision. We ask questions and try to really dig and understand what ideas are. And the same is true in terms of care. So, care ethics describes an approach to morality that is strongly relational, where relationships are the key understanding and all the complexity that goes into relationships. And one aspect that is addressed in care is emotions. A lot of moral theories try to set emotions aside as something that can interfere with objective understanding. And that's certainly true. But care looks at emotions as potentially a strength, particularly when it comes to empathy and understanding others, not just cognitively, but also emotionally. Another important aspect to care ethics is that context matters. The particulars of a situation, the web of relationships a person is in, what is going on with them, their history, their circumstances are very important in care ethics. Time also matters because relationships aren't merely transactions that occur in a split second or outside of time, but they take time to build one another. And so there's a temporal dimension to care ethics. Also, within those relationships, and because it is a feminist approach to morality, a lot of attention is paid to power and privilege in those relationships. How does one person influence the other? It doesn't assume that everybody is an equal within any particular kind of moral circumstance. Also, knowledge is important in care ethics. In philosophy, we often distinguish between ethics and epistemology, but in care ethics, epistemology is kind of baked in because in order to consider situations like the context that we discussed, it requires inquiry. It requires an ability to learn more about somebody else's situation and understand them and understand the particularities about them in order to care for them. And finally, imagination is perhaps more important than adjudication. And what I mean by that is in a lot of moral theories, it just seems like the outcome is the most important thing. Like, what should one do? Why is this morally right or wrong? And I'm not saying that those aren't important, but in care ethics, imaginatively coming to a situation where everybody can flourish is really the primary consideration. Now that you know a little bit about care ethics, you can start to see how a care ethical analysis might help you with case studies such as those in the Ethics Bowl. It would bring to light certain issues, such as what are the circumstances which contribute or detract from human flourishing and growth. The what's behind a relational approach to morality is to ensure that those relationships are positive in how they impact people. What are the power dynamics in those relationships? Are the individuals understanding one another in their particularity? Is there a connection that's being made? And what are the prospects for long-term care given the decisions that are made? Remember the temporal dimension to care. So all of those various aspects of care can be brought to bear on any particular case study. In this slide and the next slide, I want to give you some examples of how care theory might be applied to a particular kind of case. And so I picked one from the 2019-2020 Ethics Bowl called Shh. And it was a case where Teddy is a hospital nurse and one of his patients, Carol, is terminal and her circumstances are declining. Her death is somewhat imminent. And in the hallway, two of her children are disagreeing heatedly about whether to remove life support, and their argument about this is disturbing other patients. And he's asked them to quiet down, and they continue to argue about it. And he's struggling with the idea of should he kick them out, just to get some peace in the hospital and not disturb the other patients. But if he does so, it's very possible that Carol might pass away while they're not there. And how would that hurt her and their relationship. Using a care perspective for the case, you might ask questions like, whose well-being is at stake here, and what are their needs? Because in care, there's not just a single object. So you want to think about Carol, you want to think about the children, you want to think about the patient, and you want to think about the other patients in the hospital. What will promote the most long-term flourishing? What approach, what response will be best for all in terms of taking care of them? Is there further information that might be helpful? This might be an unusual question for a case, but remember that care is very much about knowledge and inquiry. And so, are there other questions to be asked that might be helpful in analyzing this particular case? Also, are there imaginative approaches that are not being considered? Is it, it's more than just simply deciding what's the right and wrong thing to do in this particular case. There might be a way to, achieve the most amount of care for the most people, and it might be not just deciding based on a rule or something. It might be something broader than that. And then thinking about how care is being expressed in different ways. How are the parents, how are the children expressing care for Carol? How is Teddy expressing care? And how might that play itself out? These are all the kinds of questions, the kinds of analysis that might go into your case review. Okay, well, thank you for watching this brief introduction. I hope it was useful to you. If you want to learn more about care ethics, there is an Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy article available. Also, one of the kind of best articles for beginners written by Nell Noddings, who's a prolific care ethicist, is called The Language of Care, and you can find that maybe through your library or online. And it's an easy read to understand more about care ethics. All right, well, good luck and take care.